Today's episode is brought to you by the FAM Certification Program. FAM is the training program you've been waiting for. Designed exclusively for women's health professionals, FAM gives you the tools to not only teach fertility awareness to your clients, but to use the menstrual cycle as a diagnostic tool in your practice. FAM is the only program that will equip you to start teaching your clients within a manageable 9-month timeframe. We cut out all of the fluff and focus entirely on the skills you need to master to support your clients. There's no program like it anywhere. We'll be starting in early 2024. Head over to fertilityfriday.com/FAMLive to join the waiting list and be the first to know when registration opens up again. That's fertilityfriday.com/FAMMLIVE. This is the Fertility Friday podcast, episode number 498. Today I'm sharing a brand new episode on a topic that I get questions about on a weekly basis. And to kick it off, the most common type of question that I get would be something along the lines of, do you know any really great healthcare providers in the New York area or the California area or, in BC where I live? And the answer is often, well, no. And so in today's episode, although I don't have a Rolodex of amazing practitioners in every single city and state across the whole world, what we're going to talk about are some practical ways to help you to find a practitioner who can support you. So let's go ahead and jump in. I want to start this episode by spending some time talking about how we view doctors, how doctors are trained, and I shouldn't just say doctors, I can say healthcare providers, but I will focus a lot of what I'm saying about specifically to doctors because ultimately it is doctors that we are typically going to and typically seeking approval from and information from. And I think that it's really important for us to have a conversation about how we look at doctors and what we should be expecting from doctors and, of course, our other healthcare providers. I'm going to be talking a little bit about how we should be considering their advice and recommendations. And then I'm going to get into the practical approaches to finding a practitioner who will support you. And of course, I'm not a medical doctor. I didn't go to medical school, but over the years of working with and interviewing numerous medical professionals, I have gathered some information about how they are trained. And I share some of those experiences in chapter 18 of my book, The Fifth Vital Sign. One thing I want you to consider is then, how are doctors trained in medical school? And there's a couple of things that are relevant to us. One, especially when it comes to women's reproductive health issues, is how they're trained to approach menstrual cycle and otherwise, women's health and hormonal issues. And that does lend itself to a conversation of how they're trained regarding hormonal contraceptives. And one of the things that is crucial to getting the support you need from your healthcare providers is to first and foremost understand what it is that they do. What is the approach that they're coming from? And that should lend itself to you understanding then what it is that they can give to you. And I like training with analogies. One of the analogies you may have even heard me use is, imagine going to McDonald's or Dairy Queen or Burger King, pick your favorite fast food restaurant, and demanding an oil change in your car and getting upset and belligerent and really just, becoming undone because the person at the cash is not able to do that for you. This is what we don't want to do. We need to first understand what our healthcare providers are trained to do. And then we have to, in my opinion, when we're going to our healthcare providers, we should be asking them to do things within what they're actually capable of doing. And that is a key to understanding why it is that our doctors aren't often giving us what we want. So if you're going to your medical doctor and you have a menstrual cycle issue, so let's say you have irregular cycles or you have period pain or something like that, what you might want is some guidance as to what you can do. Should I change my diet? Is this stressful event in my life potentially contributing to this? And And you might want to know why. Why is this happening? Why this, my friends don't have this problem that I know of. Why is this happening to me? And you might want some deeper insights. So if you understand how doctors are trained in medical school, now classical medical professionals are trained in the allopathic model. That's typically how doctors are trained. And the allopathic model, the best way to describe it is a pill for every ill. And so when you are working within this model, it's not a model that's designed to look at that root cause, what is actually causing this, and then fix that underlying reason. It's a modality that's largely based on identifying those symptoms that are problematic and treating the symptoms. So you get a headache, you take a pill for the pain, right, to make the pain go away. You have a painful period, you take a painkiller. You get the birth control pill, which shuts down ovulation and prevents you from having a normal menstrual cycle. And many women find that they might have an improvement to some degree in their period pain. None of those approaches actually ask the question of why are you having this and what's the underlying reason, and let's fix it. But all of those approaches do have the potential to give you that symptom relief. And so although that symptom relief doesn't fix the problem, it does help us in the moment to live our lives and to do what we need to do. And so when we're seeking support from our doctors, I think it's really important, first and foremost, to understand that that's how most doctors are trained and how the system is designed to work. And so then when you're looking for those answers about nutrition and holistic approaches and the underlying causes and those kinds of things, and you're getting frustrated that your doctor isn't supporting you, know that that's not how they were trained. And when you speak to doctors, and the number of interviews I've had with medical doctors over the years, classically trained medical doctors, they'll tell you that in medical school, they're taught that the menstrual cycle is 28 days. And anything that deviates from that kind of normal menstrual cycle, they're told to medicate it, whether it's with hormonal contraceptive options or other, medical interventions. They're not trained in a holistic manner because that's just not the modality that we're looking for. And even in terms of contraceptives and the question of fertility awareness, so many of my clients who have now become very aware of what's happening in their cycles, maybe they've started charting using the fertility awareness method, and now they have such a deep understanding. And many of these women are really excited and jazzed about what they're doing to the point that they bring in their charts to their medical doctor expecting some sort of, party. But often what they're met with is confusion, disdain, and discouragement because, again, medical professionals in medical school are not given extensive training about the fertility awareness method. They're not trained in understanding or even respecting fertility awareness-based methods. After speaking with a number of doctors, what I gather from, what they've told me is that they are trained really that the efficacy of the method is the most important factor. And therefore, they're looking to push methods that require the least amount of engagement or the least amount of involvement from their patients. So that would be methods like injectables or the shot or the implant or the IUD long-acting methods, the birth control pill, hormonal methods that, as I would say, make the body resistant to sperm, but don't rely on the actual participant, you, to make those decisions. And part of the reason is because those methods do tend toward a higher efficacy number. If those methods are not what you want, because perhaps you're experiencing some side effects or you're just not liking what it's doing to your body, or you want to have more control of what's going on with your hormones, or you have other concerns, that might not compute with how they were trained to deal with these issues in medical school. And if your highest priority isn't necessarily that efficacy via a hormonal method, then your desire might be at a mismatch with how your medical provider was trained to counsel you and advise you with regards to these hormonal methods. So that's the first thing that I think is really important. We need to get our expectations in line with reality, because if we're expecting something from somebody that they're not capable of providing, then it actually puts an undue requirement on them, because we can't expect them to do things that they're really not trained to do. Again, you wouldn't be yelling at the cashier at Burger King because they can't change the oil in your car. Like, you would understand that if you really need to have your oil changed, you would go to a place that does oil changes. So another thing I want to talk about is how our society views doctors. And so when you think about how medical doctors are thought of in our society, I mean, they're thought of as you could think of them as a father figure. You could think of them as gods. It's kind of like they're supposed to know all the things, and we're supposed to go in there and barely even have to provide any information. They're just supposed to know exactly what's wrong with us and have these magical answers that make us better. That's obviously ridiculous, and it's completely unrealistic. And that's not how it actually is. But in many ways, that's how it is. When your medical doctor tells you that you have this condition, when you get a diagnosis from a medical doctor, there's research studies that show that if your doctor tells you that you have 6 months to live, reliably, a high percentage of people may die right at the 6-month mark because of what they call the nocebo effect, the opposite of the placebo effect, because that's how much weight we put on our medical professionals. And if you think about it, it's crazy because there's also a documented evidence and just so many people who've had experiences being misdiagnosed, being told that they have an issue that they don't even have, being given surgery and having it being on the wrong leg or something like that. So this is something we have to keep in mind, that we do have a lot of we put a lot on these doctors, and we have these really high expectations. And after, again, having interviewed many doctors on the podcast and having many of these really interesting conversations, it actually puts too much pressure on people. So I think that there's two things we should consider here. One, it does play into the ego. And I think most of us know that many doctors do. I mean, you got to have a bit of ego to be in that work, I would say. So not trying to say it as a slight, but just trying to be honest. But then on the other hand, these are individuals who are expected to know everything. And when you have patients coming in with that level of expectation, it's not really, again, realistic. And I would say one last point on this is that the one problem I think for that particularly relates to women's health is that we're often thinking of doctors being smarter than you. The doctor would know better than you about your own body. So that's something that we want to change. A doctor can go to medical school and know a whole lot more than you about a whole lot of things, but you're the one that lives in your body every day. And so if you know what's normal for you, and then all of a sudden something changes and you feel like it's related to this factor or that factor, or whether it's the dietary factors or the lifestyle factors or something like that. And you go to the doctor and you say, I have this problem. I didn't used to have this problem. I know my body. And I think it's because I've been doing X, Y, Z. And the doctor says, one has nothing to do with the other. Everybody knows that your diet can't contribute to this problem, or, that kind of stuff. Often we leave the office and we kind of internalize that and then feel stupid, but that's the wrong approach, because you're the one who lives in your body every day. So no one will ever know more about your own body than you. And you might not have the medical terminology or the degree to correctly explain what's going on, or to even ask the right questions to get the answers the testing or whatever needs to be done to determine that. But the takeaway of this point is that we often think doctors are smarter than us, and therefore we delegate our power to them. And if we really want to get better and get to the root cause of what's going on in our lives and our health and our bodies, especially related to our women's reproductive challenges, then we're going to have to stop thinking that all these health professionals are smarter than us. And we're going to have to start thinking about them as individuals who we are inviting to be on our care team to help us ultimately to find the answers that we need. This brings me to an important question. So how should we view doctors? If I'm saying that we're viewing doctors in a way that's not conducive, how should we be looking at them? I have a couple suggestions, of course. And one of the things, I think we should view them as experts in their field based on their training, but we have to be clear on what that field is and what that training was about. We have to know that medical doctors, and I know I'm picking on medical doctors today, they're not nutritionists. When a person is classically trained in medical school, they're not trained in nutrition. They're not trained in root cause medicine. They're not trained to look for those underlying factors and then try to help correct those underlying factors so that the body can essentially heal itself. We need to understand that that's not what they do. And with that in mind, it means that when you're making your appointments to see whatever healthcare provider, you should be thinking about it first. Like, what is it that you want to get out of this? And can the person in front of me actually do that thing? We should also be considering that all healthcare providers are human beings first. And although we can be extremely impressed by a person's education and the letters behind their name and all of those fancy things, especially if we don't have fancy names behind or letters behind our names, they're human beings. They are specialized in some areas. And that means that in some areas, they are brilliant and they know a lot of things. And in other areas, they actually just don't have the knowledge. And one of the challenges is that with some of these letters behind the names and the prestige and all that, I'm sure that some of you listening have experienced that huge ego problem where the person doesn't necessarily know about this particular issue, but they're not going to say that. They're not going to say, I just don't know about that. But if you have questions about this other thing, I mean, I could go on about that. I could write a dissertation on it. Many of us have experienced this ego problem where this person isn't knowledgeable about this particular thing, but because of their position, title, prestige, whatever, they're going to act like they know everything about it or tell you it doesn't work or tell you it's wrong or whatever. But really, they just don't even have any business talking about it because they literally never had any training on it. So I think that's something where we have to remember that all of these health professionals are human beings like us. They have certain areas that they specialize in and other areas that they don't. And we should really be, when we have a question or an issue that is related to their area of specialization, then we should be relying on them for that. But if it's outside of that, we really should be realistic and find the person who does specialize in that area. The other thing I want you to consider is I think my suggestion would be to consider medical professionals, instead of being the be all and end all, the person that we're delegating our health to and our outcomes to, we should be really thinking about them as individuals who we are looking at hiring, I guess, but people who work for us instead of like we're going to them and it's like they're the ones in charge. We should really get to the point where we're looking at healthcare providers as individuals who are working for us. Like we are the one that has the goal and the outcome that we want. And we're almost like an audition, like when you're going to see your healthcare provider, like you have this problem, you're going to say, I have this problem and I need some help. And they're going to say, okay, well, I think you should do this and that and whatever. And then if what they're saying feels good to you, then you could be like, okay, I think we can move forward. That sounds okay. But if what they're saying makes no sense or they're belittling you or you're, feel terrible in the office because they're making you feel stupid, then audition over. You failed. And now I'm going to find somebody else who can help me because I don't work for you. Like you are supposed to work for me, right? That's how this is supposed to work. So in my opinion, of course. Now, to kind of even go a little deeper into this, I want to just think about that question of, okay, so in addition to how we should view doctors, how should we look at their advice? So when you're going to any healthcare provider, regardless of whether they're functional or not functional or whatever, when you go to this healthcare provider and you tell them, okay, I have this problem, I've got this concern with my hormones, with my menstrual cycle, whatever it is, then there's a couple things I want you to consider. Before, and I said this already, so I'm going to reiterate this, before making your appointment, consider what you want the outcome to be. So don't even make the appointment before you think about what is the outcome that I want. Sometimes when you go to a doctor, the outcome that you want is for them to do a test. Sometimes that's what you want. Sometimes you have a list of blood work that you are hoping to get, and maybe you have insurance and you're hoping that your doctor will be able to order them so that you don't have to pay out of pocket. And so when you're going to a healthcare provider, it should be goal-oriented. And you should think in your mind, like, this is what I want. And that can also help clarify, because if ultimately that's all you want at the end of this appointment, you just want that requisition for the blood work, that you need, then you don't need to worry about if they're going to approve of your menstrual cycle charting or whatever it is. Like, you can just interact in a way that is nice and friendly, whatever, but ultimately you know that your goal is to get this requisition, just as an example. Don't lie to yourself about what these health professionals know, what they don't. If what you really want is nutritional support and advice, if you have concerns about how your diet could be contributing to your overall issues, then look for a provider who can provide that type of information to you. Don't go to your traditionally trained medical doctor that might have had 30 minutes to an hour of nutrition once in their entire degree. Go to the person who studied nutrition for their whole degree and then talk to them about the nutritional advice. And I would go so far as to say, just because someone studied nutrition in school doesn't even mean that they can help you with your particular issue. You have to also find someone who specializes in the type of nutritional support that you're looking for and the type of condition overall that you have. So we've really got to move away from this kind of generalist concept to looking for the right person who has the right skill set that can actually help you. Popping into today's episode with a quick question. Do you like paper charting? Today's episode is brought to you by the Fertility Awareness Mastery Charting Workbook. This is the first beautifully designed, fully customizable paper charting workbook designed with you in mind. With 3 years worth of charting pages, the Fertility Awareness Mastery Charting Workbook has you covered. If you've been looking for a solid alternative to charting apps, you'll love this charting workbook. The FAM Charting Workbook is available in both Fahrenheit and Celsius editions and is available in spiral-bound, paperback, and ebook versions. Head over to fertilityfriday.com/workbook to order your copy today. That's fertilityfriday.com/workbook. Now let's go ahead and jump back into today's episode. Another thing is huge. Always give yourself time before acting on any type of recommendation. I've spoken to countless women who go to the doctor. They're told they have this problem. They're told they need surgery the next day. And then, they rush into the surgery only to discover that maybe they could have waited a couple of weeks. I think that we can get really caught up in this wheel, this kind of healthcare wheel of you have to do this thing now and all that kind of stuff. And that's an unfortunate high pressure situation that isn't really fair to the patient. And it goes back to what I was saying before about how we view doctors. We look at them as this father figure. Sometimes we look at them as this, supreme authority. And if they're saying something, it must be true. And if they're saying I have to do this tomorrow, I must have to do it tomorrow. So some practical advice, always give yourself time for the recommendation. When you're going to see any healthcare provider, think in your mind, maybe make a rule or something for yourself that I'm not going to do anything for 7 days, or I'm not going to do anything until I talk to my partner or my sister or my friend or my cousin or whatever. Just give yourself a structure around it so that you're never tempted to just rush and do whatever, even if it comes to taking medication, even if it's having a prescription. Give yourself 7 days. Give yourself whatever, even 2 hours. Give yourself a little time for anything that's recommended, anything that's prescribed, any procedure that you're told that you need to do. And then the other thing is get a second opinion. There's so many issues that arise from people running and making decisions and doing things without getting a second opinion first. It is crazy. For those of you who are listening, who've actually gone and gotten a second opinion, I'm talking too fast. I'm like, blah. But for those of you who have actually gotten a second opinion, how many times have you gotten a second opinion from somebody and the second opinion is different to the first? And even if you've had another third opinion, the third opinion and the other two aren't exactly the same and the recommendations are different. So this is the thing. These individuals who are healthcare providers are human, okay? And so we need to really just take a big breath, calm down, and remember that. We shouldn't ever be giving someone so much power that you could literally see somebody for 10 minutes and they could change the entire trajectory of your life with some sort of surgery or procedure or whatever that you didn't even plan to get when you walked in, and you didn't even ask for a second opinion from someone else. Okay, along those lines, consider the phone a friend option. Just have your scripts ready. Well, I really appreciate that. I had no idea that that's something I should look into. But before I make any decisions, I'm going to talk to my husband, sister, cousin, friend, whatever. Unless you're bleeding out on the table, unless it's so severe and egregious that you really do need to have this done now, you don't really need to do anything today or tomorrow. You can always wait a week or a month. Okay. That brings me to the last but not least very, very important piece of today's episode, which is practical approaches to finding a practitioner who will support you. When the question arises, okay, I've learned all this really amazing stuff about my body. I've learned the importance of nutrition, of lifestyle factors, of supplements. I've learned the importance of the macronutrients, micronutrients, and I need some support here. I need to have somebody to help me with this. I really want someone to help me to interpret these things. How do I find this perfect doctor that's going to help me do all the things? The first thing that I'll suggest is to ask for referrals and recommendations in your circle. It sounds so simple, but for whatever reason, when it comes to medical stuff and health stuff, we look at it very differently than we look at basically anything else. Now, if I were to say to you, or if we were talking, let's say you and I are hanging out, we're having coffee or whatever, and I want to get a new hairdresser. So maybe my hairdresser moved out of town or whatever. So I now need a new hairdresser. How am I going to go about that? Am I just going to randomly walk into someone's place that I have no idea about their background or whatever and just like let them have a go at my hair. No, if you're looking for a hairdresser, you're probably going to ask your friends. If you see somebody that has really amazing hair, you're going to just say, wow, you have such awesome hair. Where do you get your hair done? Whatever. This is how we do it, right? And you're going to look at, even nowadays, you can go online and look at the different ratings and all of that. You can look at their Instagram pages. Like there's so many things we can do now. If you're going to go buy a car, what do? Do we just run into the first dealership on the side of the road or whatever and just buy whatever car like, no, if you're looking for a car, you might take months reviewing online, looking at different brands, looking at price points. Like you might do all kinds of stuff. So why is it that when we're looking for a medical professional, we like do none of that? And why is it that many of us will just continue to go to the same doctor that we went to when we were kids, right? So we have to start thinking about just look for a medical provider, look for a doctor. Actually, think about this from that perspective. So that's the first part. I just want to shift your mindset a little bit on looking for a healthcare provider. So one of the first things that you can do is ask for referrals. Talk to people in your life. Ask around. Maybe you have a really great, I don't know, chiropractor or acupuncturist or friend or whatever. Maybe there's someone in your life who might know of a great doctor. Have you ever thought to ask them? One of the things that I often recommend to people that is so simple, and it's actually mind-blowing that people don't do this. So if you do this, it's fine. But I'm sure that some of you listening just wouldn't think to do this. Literally open up your internet browser and search where you live, so your town, and functional doctor or women's health and hormones or whatever. Just start there, because often we think that we need to go to some fancy place or there's no one in my area and whatever it is. But what I found is that many of us, depending on where we live and depending on how big of a center we live in, but many of us have these amazing health professionals in our backyard. We've just not heard their name before. And all we needed to do was a simple search for the specific issue potentially or category of issue that we're looking for in our local area. And you might be just shocked at how many people come up. That's something that I often recommend. And it's interesting because when I do my live classes and I recommend this to clients, often they're telling me, oh yeah, I didn't think to do that, because we have medical care providers in a different category in our brains. And so we're not really thinking about finding them in the same way that we often look to find other things that we need in other areas of our life. Now, that's not enough, right? Because doing a random search wouldn't necessarily always garner you the proper support that you need. So in addition to that, I think that it is important not to generalize by type of provider. So you don't want to think to yourself, well, all doctors are da 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 da. No, they're not. There's a huge difference in all medical providers. Or just because someone's, this type of functional provider, that automatically means that they're good. No, it doesn't. So I think especially one of the things I've learned from doing the podcast over the years is that every health care professional is not the same. When you have a specific issue that you have a concern with, let's say that you have a concern about your thyroid, or let's say you have a concern, do I have PCOS, or do I have HA, or do I have endometriosis, or am I experiencing hormonal imbalances, or do I have raging PMS or PMDD? Let's say that you have a specific issue that's related to, let's say, women's reproductive health or women's hormones or whatever. So that should help to guide you when you're seeking a practitioner, because you don't just want a general practitioner who just does all the things. If you have a specific health concern, then if you're able to find somebody, you want to particularly find somebody who specializes in the specific issue that you have. That makes a world of difference. Going to a provider that occasionally has a PCOS client once a year versus the provider who has devoted their practice to PCOS clients, it is a game changer. You're dealing with somebody who just lives and breathes in the conditions that you have. And that person is going to get you to the results a whole lot faster with a whole lot less struggle than the person who doesn't do this all the time. That is something to really keep in mind. And this is something that you should also consider when you're looking at your same doctor that you've had since you were 5 years old or whatever. Now, it doesn't mean to get rid of that doctor. Maybe they're really, really wonderful, but your general practitioner, your general doctor, wouldn't have that specialization if you have now developed a new condition. So this doesn't always mean that you have to throw away your old providers, because maybe they can be very helpful and be on the team in a more general sense. But then if a new issue arises or you have a specific concern, you really want to think about, okay, so I have this specific issue and I need support with that. So who can I find that lives and breathes this issue? This is what they do. This is what they're practical, or this is what they're jazzed about. This is what their practice is focused on. That is the person who you want. Over years of doing interviews and podcast interviews, the person who has just taken that interest, and often when I ask the, healthcare providers and different experts that have been on the show over the years, when I ask them what is it that brought them into the work that they do, I mean, you can go back and listen for yourself. They're often sharing they have some sort of personal connection to that issue. So whether it's that they had that issue themselves or someone in their family did or whatever, it's very interesting. And so when you have these providers that do specialize or take a special interest in a certain area, then they're coming to it with a different degree of attention and care, and even a different type of energy. And so it doesn't mean it's going to be perfect every time, obviously. And it doesn't mean you may not end up having to go from one practitioner or another if you don't like someone's methods. But if you approach it in this type of a way, it does give you a higher probability of really finding what you need and finding that care. So definitely something to think about. Another really important piece of it is consider seeking support, not just from doctors, but also from other health professionals, including functional health providers. So really think about this concept of who's on your team. And this is an analogy that I share in the Fifth Vital Sign, and it's what I share in training modules when I'm working with my clients and women's healthcare professionals, which is I really want you to think about, picture there's a boardroom and you're sitting at the head of the boardroom. Now, your team of healthcare providers, those are the individuals who are going to help you, because one person does not have all the answers. Even if you find someone that's great and they know a lot about a lot, no one person has all the answers to all your problems. That's just not even possible. And so we really have to think about who's on our team. So let me give you an example. If there's a client of mine who's struggling with HA, maybe that person has a coach on their team. Maybe that person has a psychologist on their team who can support them with some of the body image issues that they've gone through, or potentially disordered eating patterns. So like a psychologist or psychiatrist or something like that. And maybe this person has a nutritionist so that they can get a better, more balanced perspective on how to approach their eating patterns, so that they're balancing not only what they need from a macronutrient perspective, but to replenish the nutrient deficiencies that might have been acquired by their way of eating or not eating. But also, this person may need a support group from other women who've been through a similar experience, because often when we are around other peers who have that deep understanding that they've been through a similar thing and they have a deep understanding of what it is, that can be so motivating as well. And so when a person has a really serious health condition, or if they have a serious concern about their hormone health or something like that, it's often not just one provider that just does all the work. If you talk to people who've overcome certain issues, difficult ones, or health-related issues, they often needed to seek support from a variety of professionals in different areas to really get that kind of complete overall healing and result that they were looking for. So definitely something to consider, where many of us have to kind of stop trying to put all of the eggs into one basket, so to speak, and stop expecting that one provider to be this magnificent unicorn that knows every single possible thing about every single possible modality, and really think about it more as a team approach. A couple last things that are also important. I would suggest investigate first. So if you are doing it this way, or even if you get a referral, investigate. This is the era of information. All of these people, or at least most of them, have social media presences. Look at their website. Look at what they talk about. Do they have a podcast? Do they have an Instagram page, a Facebook page? Do they put out content? Do they have a blog? Look at what they're talking about, what they're interested in. Are they interested in the thing that you are needing help with? Do they put out content related to that? Often, it's surprising these days how much information is out there. And how many people don't look for it? And how many people don't think to do this? So you can actually look at someone and spend not even a lot of time, 15, 20 minutes investigating this individual and seeing what type of information they're putting out there. And then all of a sudden now you have a better sense. If you did that, if you searched in your area and found 5 practitioners who roughly match what you're looking for and have specialization in the area that you need support with, and then you also went the other step to look at their websites and just write your top 5 points or whatever, that you would be amazed at how different of a position you would be in to kind of think about who might be the best person to go to just from doing that. And then once you've done that and you have that first appointment, consider it an audition. You're interviewing them. Sometimes it can be costly, but it's also costly to go to the wrong person and get the wrong advice. So it's something to consider where you don't have to take this to the extreme and interview 10 people or anything, but you can think about it that way. And this brings me to the last and possibly most important point, which is know when it's time to move on. Maybe you've been going to this person for years now, and you kind of you don't like their bedside manner. You don't like how they talk to you, but you feel like, but I've been with this person for so long and they, they're usually kind of helpful and they have done a few things for me. Sometimes you just have to call it quit. Sometimes you just have to end it. And it's hard. It's not an easy thing to do sometimes, but again, we have to remember to put ourselves in that mindset of they're supposed to be working for us, not them, not us working for them. So ultimately, know when it's time to move on and know that you deserve to have the best possible care available. If you have a concern that was enough that caused you to pick up the phone, make an appointment, take a shower, put on your clothes, drive across town to go see this person, that person needs to take you seriously. And if they are not willing to take you seriously, then you need to move on and find somebody who will. So that brings me to the end of what I wanted to talk about today in today's episode. I hope that you found some value in some of the points that I brought up. And to do the quick summary, we need to consider how our health professionals are trained, how we're viewing them as a culture, and how maybe we should be switching that and looking at what we can expect from providers more realistically. We should really be cautious of how we view their advice. We should really always take the time that we need to consider, and so that we don't end up being pressured into doing things too fast before we've really had the time to consider the implications of these things. And when it comes to then finding somebody, let's start at our local level. Let's not think that we need to find this magical person. And remember that often there are great practitioners who specialize in the issues that you have right there within your community. You may just not have heard their name before. So there's a whole lot that can be done, even just at that kind of grassroots level, searching, researching, investigating, etc. If you enjoyed today's episode and you can think of a few people who would benefit from it, the share link is fertilityfriday.com/498. And of course, I hope you have a wonderful weekend whenever you're tuning into the show. And as always, until next time, be well and happy charting. And that's a wrap. If you've been loving the podcast, then I know you'll love our Fertility Awareness Mastery Mentorship Program. This is our 9-month immersive experience that will completely transform the way that you work with clients, allowing you to not only teach fertility awareness to your clients, but to use the menstrual cycle as a vital sign and diagnostic tool in your women's health practice. We're starting again in early 2024. Head over to fertilityfriday.com/famlive to join the waiting list and be the first to know when registration opens up again. There is no program like this offered anywhere. Transform your practice in 9 months. Join the waiting list over at fertilityfriday.com/FAMMLIVE.